YouTube, welcome back to Wtf Rc Cars. So, carrying on with the 420X, and in the last video you might have spotted I'd got these B parts swapped around, got them on the wrong way. So that's the way they go with the little bits that stick down. You want them both together, and then on the front they don't have the little piece in. So need to concentrate a bit more when I'm doing this, but hopefully we'll not make any more mistakes. But we're going to carry on with build of the 420X. So we're starting, I believe, on section 6, which will be the diffs, I believe. So let's get you in for a close-up look, and we'll crack on with build. So moving on, very similar to how you build the diffs in the TA08 Pro, but seem to be higher quality parts. The gears are the same, but this time we've got bearings instead of bushings for the output, and for these I'm just going to put a tiny bit of grease on them, or hoodie oil, and then we'll be using the O-ring grease for these bits. So first off, we need an MA20 and an MA30. So we'll pop them together. No need to grease it because it's a proper bearing. So they slide in quite easily. Next, we're going to be wanting to get a little bit of bearing, little bit of O-ring grease, sorry. And it does just make the O-rings last a bit longer. So if we drop these down and then you stick your finger on it, you can usually get them to go in pretty easy. So not bad so far. So the next thing you're going to want to do is put the larger of the shims. So this is the MA13. So we're going to sit one of them on. Then it's telling us we need one of the tiny shims. So I believe the larger one is the MA13, and then this is the MA16. So these are really tiny. Then once you've dropped that down, we're going to have one of his favourite parts, which is getting one of these tiny little pins through. And it's normally not too bad getting it in this side. And it kind of helps if you just push that second little shim down, because you don't want to tear the shim up as you're putting it in. So once we've got the pin in, we can then get our gear on. Then once all that's in place, it's asking us to place this gasket on. So moving along to the next part, again MA30 and an MA20. We're gonna get covered in O-ring grease. So we've got to carefully get that down to the bottom, and then it usually pushes it out, but if you get your finger in, you can usually keep them down with it. So then we're going to close it up with an MA13. And we just need to get that into place. Then we're going to need the much smaller shim. I believe that's the MA16. And we've got to work that down. And then you've got the two sort of cutouts where you should hopefully be able to line the holes up for your output cup. And then we had the lovely task of getting the little pin all the way down into diff and then through that hole. So if you get it lined up with one of the sort of slots, and then you've got to carefully sort of maneuver it and then once you get it started, you just got to carefully get it through and make sure the shim is sat all the way down on the other side so you don't get tearing it up. But if you're nice and careful, you can get the pin to go through. Then we sit the gear on. So that's got us two halves, and we don't need as O-ring grease for a while. So next bit that's different to the TA08. So rather than using the sort of composite or plastic spider, we're using the separate parts. So on this, we're going to have to get a GV1 on each side. Then you're going to get one of the tiny little shims. I think these are MA17s. So we're going to have one of these on either side of that gear. Then we've got to get the gear lined up and get it into position. And then you've just got to spin the shaft so the flat is on the bottom, and just make sure your shims are sat behind each gear and they've not fell off. Now if you find this really awkward, you can put a bit of your diff grease on these and it'll hold them in place for you. But at the moment they're not seeming to go together too bad. So we want them to sit down nicely. You can try and rotate your diff, make sure nothing's binding. Do make sure you clip all the little ends off your gears. So next thing we're going to do, we need to fill this diff up. So turn is to just slowly fill it, and you want it just above the actual white gears. So I try and get a little bit down the back, make sure it's into everywhere, and then it's turn is to fill it so it's just above the actual gears, which is a little bit more than where you usually fill them. You usually get told to fill the diffs just above the cross, but it does look like there's quite a bit more sort of area in this diff. It does look like it holds a bit more oil than some of the other touring cars, but then you just want to work that around slowly. Don't do it too quick, else you'll sort of pull air down into the diff, which you don't want to do. But basically we just want to make sure we've got no air gaps in there, and as long as you fill it quite slowly, you don't really get air trapped in it. But once we've got that together, we just need to leave that sit and let any air bubbles come out. So we'll get rid of those air bubbles and then we'll move on. So once we've left it for our air bubbles to all work the way out, we just need to assemble the two halves of the diff. And it looks like they were spot on with the amount that you put it in and where you do it, because it's only just coming out the screw holes. So you just need to make sure your gasket's lined up. And these are the tiny screws, so these are the MA8s. So yeah, it's a 1.5mm hex that you're going to need for these. And the way I tend to screw them down, I'll get one close and then just work round to the complete opposite. So once I've got them nipped down, I'll then just work round, and you really don't want to be over tightening these because you'll write your diff off. So you can quickly wipe off any excess diff grease and then give your diff a try, and must hand it to Tamiya. That is a really nice feeling diff. So lastly, once we've got the diff closed, we need us blue seal bearings, one on either side. They just snap into place, and then you need the K1 parts, and these are same as the TA08, just what you use to set the tension on the belt, and you can raise or lower the diff sort of center of gravity with it. But that's one fully assembled diff. So let's move on, see what else we need. So you need these parts for the upper rear suspension, upper bulkheads. We need these little spacers, and then these parts, make sure you have the triangle in the right place, because there are two different ways that these go together. So first off, we're going to get this part. We're going to sit our spacer in. So MA46, MA35, and then we want an MA37, and that should hold in and locate through. So for this one, you want the triangle to the outside. Then we're going to get a set of screws, and these screws are the MA2. So these are 3x8s and 2mm hex that won't let go of an MIP driver. So once we've got that assembled, you then need one of your little ball joints, 5x5s. We want the spacer, the MA11 spacer, and we're just going to screw that straight down into the part that we've just assembled. So we should end up with that, and now I will quickly do exactly the same but in reverse for the opposite side, and then we should have our two bulkhead uppers assembled. So we'll get this quickly assembled, same as that one, and carry on. So we're now going to be fitting the bulkhead. So on these, I want it in the lower position, so that's the bigger gap towards the top, and then the line that runs through it, it's turn as the stock position is to have the line just one space forward. So I'm not sure I'll be able to get this on camera, but the line that runs through it, you want the bigger gap at the top and the line just facing forward, so sort of at that angle. But it is something that you're going to have to adjust to change the tension on the actual belt. So let's get the belt into place, and then see how easy it is to get these all lined up. Well, that's both of them looking correct, but moving along. So now we're going to put these into position, and it says we need the MA4 screws for this. So I'm just going to get them started. Sorry, MA3 screws these are. So just gently get them tightened down. And then we can just work our way around nipping these up. Then quickly just make sure your belt's all the way around. I'm just quickly checking both these to make sure they're both in the correct position. Right, so once we've got them down, we can move along. I believe it's going to be the center pulley possibly on this. So let's crack on, see what we've got next. Right, so building up the pulleys next. So we're going to want one of them bearings in the back. We want a normal bearing in the front. It's like they're not going to stay. Then we're going to push one of the spacers over here. See if we can get these to go together without his bearings falling out every time we pick it up. So we're then going to need the MA32. We're going to need one of these assemblies, and then its tiners to use. We've got a bunch of little shims, and I think these are 0.2, 0.1 and 0.3, so the MA16, 15 and 14. But basically it's just a case of assemble it and see which shim fits, or see which shim you need to hold everything together and let it rotate smoothly. So I'm just trying it with the smallest first, because you do also have the tiny little MA12 that goes over that side. Looking at that, I'm thinking we can probably get away with a slightly thicker shim. Certainly looks like on mine the slightly thicker one is going to be the better fit. So you basically want this as tight as possible with no play but not binding. And then just make sure that this shim is sat down properly when you tighten this up. And what we're looking for, it tells you don't fully tighten this, but basically we're looking for no play in that direction but no binding whatsoever. So we don't need the other two thinner shims. So that's what we should be left with once we assemble it, with your belt guides towards the center. So let's see what else we've got. So we're now needing to pop our belts on. So let's see which way around we got this. So we're running that belt to that side, and you're going to want the front belt or the longer belt sliding on. So then we're going to get that into position and put the MA5 through here. Then we want us 3mm shim or spacer, and we're going to have to get this through this back part. So we want that inside. So you need that bit lined up across. That feels a lot better and it's a lot smoother. Yeah, we got no resistance on that whatsoever. Feels lovely. So definitely one to bear in mind. That bit, the flats have got to run level with the body, but we've not got his belt catching anywhere, and it's looking quite nice so far. So let's carry on. So we're going to be building the front upper bulkhead parts. So it's the 2mm shims, and you want the triangle towards the tower part on these. So if we get the shim in and then drop that in, and then you want the MA2 screws So on these it's the 3x8mm screws. So once we've got them tightened up, you're then going to need your 2mm shim on these. Then we need to screw the ball joint in. So that's what we should be looking at, and then I can quickly get the second one assembled. So that's what we should be looking at once we've done it, and you want the triangle towards the front on both them. So let's see what else we've got. So moving on, we've got a spool to build. So you need an output cup in either side of that, and then we're just going to drop one of the screws down the center and get these fastened in, and these are the longer MA1 screws. And although it has a few parts sort of similar to the TA01 Pro, at this point things are starting to look very different. So when you're putting these together, looks like it should have that lip on the inside. And it does just snap together. Instructions are not really clear on that. Then we just need a bearing on either side, and then just as eccentric offsets to let us mount the diff. So basically should be what it looks like when you're done. Let's see what else we've got. Right, so moving on to fitting a spool. I have to make sure the belt's on properly, and then I'm going to set these same as the front one, the rear. So I'm going to have these facing ever so slightly forward, and again all the way to bottom. And same as the TA08 Pro, all the way forward does seem a little tight on the front belt. So I'm going to drop it to the center position. Because I did end up changing it on the TA08 Pro. Just on the front. That feels better. Right, so once we got that into position, we need to get us towers. And then we're going to use the shorter of the screws to fasten these on. So these are the MA3s, and you need 4 of them. So I'll just get these gently screwed on. And then I can just tighten them down. So we should have a full drive system, and that is really, really smooth. So we've got our rear diff, front spool, and basically it just feels like there's no resistance in that at all. Really impressed. So I think we'll call it a day at that, and I think this is enough for one video. Really impressed with build so far. The fit and finish of everything is absolutely perfect, and it just looks very impressive. But let's wrap this one up. So there we have it. We've got the front and rear bulkheads assembled, and as dry belt system, and yeah, I'm really enjoying this. It's interesting to see how close yet how different it is to the TA08 Pro. But thanks again for watching Wtf Rc Cars. If you like this kind of content, don't forget to like and subscribe, hit the notification bell, share to friends and family, and catch you guys again to see where this 420X ends up. Laters.